Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 214 of the Juicebox Podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Realgood Foods, Dexcom, Omnipod, and Dancing for Diabetes. There are links to all of the wonderful sponsors in your show notes and at juiceboxpodcast.com. Today I'll be speaking with Isabel. She's a nurse from Australia. Well, I think she's from Scotland, but she could be from New York. It's hard to tell. She's a bit of a jet setter. Or at least she was when she was younger. Isabel has type 1 diabetes. She's the mom of two adorable children, one of them who you're going to meet at the end of the episode. And she runs a business in Australia called In Range Diabetes. You can check that out at inrangediabetes.com.au. That's right, we have so many Australian listeners at this point, I have to do episodes just for you guys. Thanks for that, by the way. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before becoming bold with insulin or making any changes to your healthcare plan. In my mind, you understand, in my adult American mind, you live in what I'm assuming is a shack made of 3 boards and an alligator's tail.
Oh, and I'm close to that.
Well, then, in fact, I'm sorry. It's fine.
No, I enjoy my shack.
That's excellent.
So I'm Isabel. I am a type 1 diabetic and have been since I was 10, so for 24 years. I'm a mother of 2 little ones, one 2-year-old and a 3-month-old. And I live in Australia.
Okay, now you're probably going to be fairly impressed, Isabel, when I tell you that you're 34 years old.
I'm very impressed. Very good.
Thank you very much.
There.
I appreciate this. Well, so Australia, but are you from Australia or are you from America?
No, I'm actually from Scotland.
Okay.
So I moved to America when I was 4. I lived in LA for 4 years and New York for 4 years, and then lived in Sydney, Australia for 4 years, and then moved back to America for a year, and then back to Australia. So,
we'll get to that in a second as well. But I think your microphone might be touching your clothes, though. So I'm getting like a little.
Okay.
Yep. So. All right, cool. Okay, so I could hear you fine. There was a little bit of scraping in the background that will, at some point while we're talking, bother me more than anybody else. And I'll just be sitting here. You'll be talking, and I'll be thinking, I can hear it hitting your sweater.
I can hear it.
Okay, so obviously I didn't keep up as much as I would have liked, but you were born in Scotland, moved to Los Angeles, moved to New York, moved to Australia.
Yep, and then
back to New York?
To New York and back again. Yep.
So your parents, or you, I'm assuming one of you, is an international gangster. Is that correct?
Yep, totally. No, my dad worked for the Bank of Scotland, which doesn't really sound like it means you would travel a lot, but we I guess he got promoted every once in a while, and we moved.
They kept moving around. I prefer to think that you were running from your father's gambling debts. I think it's a much more exciting story.
Much more exciting.
I'm going to tell myself in my head as we're talking. Well, that's really crazy. Now, how did you find being transplanted so many times? I guess the first time when you're 4, do you have a recollection of thinking, wow, none of these people speak correctly?
No, I have no recollection of that whatsoever. And even the next move, nothing, next 2 moves, nothing, but it was when I was 12 and we moved back to New York. That was hard. And everyone just kind of ignored me.
Well, here's why, if I can guess on the just at the onset. You have an Americanized Australian Scottish accent, which you can actually hear all parts of while you're speaking. It's fascinating. You start off Scottish, you trail off Australian, and everything's just a little American as you go.
I hear. It's very strange.
Do you hear it or no? I'm sure you don't hear it. If you're in the Orlando, Florida area, it's time to start thinking about the Dancing for Diabetes Touched by Type 1 event that's going to be on May 18th. Go to dancingfordiabetes.com to find out more. That's dancing4diabetes.com. I think you're going to know one of the speakers. He sounds a lot like me.
I can't hear it at all, and I was going to say I usually can't hear accents very well, but then if I hear an accent that's Scottish or one that's an American, I can get it right away.
So 2 things. Yeah. The listeners, I have a lot of listeners on the West Coast who are originally from the East Coast. I get a ton of notes that tell me that the podcast makes them feel comfortable because I talk the way they grew up. And every time I get that, I think, oh, that's so nice. Then the second thing I think is, I don't speak any specific way, which is completely untrue. None of us really feel like that. The other thing is my brother-in-law is from Scotland and has made no real effort to in any way Americanize how he speaks. And when I speak to him, I stare at him. I listen incredibly intently.
Trying to pick up anything.
But all I really hear is I as he's talking, and I try so hard, and I'm looking and looking and looking, and sometimes you hear key words, and then you just get to the pause point and you go because I don't know what he's saying.
You assume something has been said. Yep. Yep.
It's fascinating. Now his wife hears him perfectly, and she's from Pennsylvania. So maybe if I lived with him longer, I would figure it out. But nevertheless, it just sounds like I to me. And I'm not trying to be cartoonish about it. I mean, he mumbles.
No, completely.
Right? He mumbles through what he's saying. He uses a lot of slang that has no perspective for me whatsoever. And then speaks very quietly, and then every once in a while just gets excited. This all sounds very familiar.
Yes. Yep, it does.
Is that how your father speaks, or he was able to pull it together to get his promotion at the bank, I guess?
No, he's well, my friends think occasionally they have difficulty here, like understanding him. Right. But I think because he was, in the business world and whatever, he has quite, good, understandable.
It's funny how an international world changes everything. A friend of mine just the other day pulled out his phone and he said, "Listen to this voicemail." And he was left a voicemail by a colleague of his in India. And we have, to say that my daughter's best friend is Indian is not an understatement. Like there's a pretty big Indian population where I live. And I listened to that voicemail and I said to him, I was like, I didn't hear 3 words. I'm sorry. And how do you do your job? And he said in the first couple of weeks when I was at this company, I really did have to sit around and intently try to slow myself down and listen, because he's like, you can hear once you can hear, and I was like, that's really kind of weird. But okay, so you're an international jet setter who got back to New York when she was 12. And do you think it was just because you were from somewhere else and you had an accent that the kids or did you, and how did you find that? Because you're 2 years into your diabetes at that point, right?
Oh, wait, hold on. No, so, okay, I was 4 when I got to LA, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. Moved away from America when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then moved back when I was 16.
Is that when you had the trouble? Like with people?
Yes, that's when I had the trouble.
Just going, oh, that's
Isabel. when I moved back again. Yeah, and I particularly wanted to go back to the same area and the same school, obviously, because I was like, oh, I've got friends there, it'll be easy. Right. But yeah, no, that was harder.
Well, yeah, 16 is a weird time to try to insert yourself into a friend circle.
No, that's a weird time.
Plus, No, I hear that. Plus, they probably thought there was a deadly spider hanging in your closet that you brought back with you from Australia, which is my entire understanding of Australia, by the way. And I will tell you that the podcast is, I don't think oddly, but incredibly popular in Australia. New Zealand and that whole area gets a lot of downloads. So thank you, everybody. And that's
Very
not
cool.
that's not why I had Isabel on, just to make you people feel better. That's not why I did this. I'm just kidding. It's not why. So Isabel, you are a diabetes educator beyond having type 1 diabetes. Is that right?
Yes, I'm a registered nurse and a diabetes educator. So I've been doing my own private practice for 3 years now in diabetes education.
Okay. So prior to that, you worked in a hospital?
No, so that just means, you can either be public or private in Australia, and public just means you work in a hospital. And private is that you've basically set up your own
Practice.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna probably stumble on a couple of words that aren't gonna sync up here, but that's okay. So do you have a doctor in your practice, or are you the medical expert in the practice?
I'm the only one in the practice. Normally here you would have, well, no, not normally, but a lot of diabetes educators here work out of a doctor's practice. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to.
Basically set up shop on your own, and you're just focused on helping people with type 1.
Well, no, type 1 and type 2, technically.
Okay.
Because, it's too hard just to do type 1. But, just basically.
So you're supporting people with diabetes in Australia on your, by the way, very industrious, because you have 2 little kids. I had trouble this weekend planning cutting the lawn with something else because I have children. I was like, I don't know if I could do both things in one day. But you were obviously a little more industrious than I am, and so this is pretty cool. So what is because your email to me was, hey, I found the podcast 6 months ago or so, and I'm enjoying it, and I felt like you were saying you and I think about things very similarly. Is that right?
Yeah. And I don't know where that stems from in me. I just taking each day as it comes, and not thinking too much of the bad days, and then just carrying on and that kind of thing.
Just sort of staying fluid with the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because genuinely, right before you and I got on, about an hour before we started, it's very early in the morning where I am, and it's very late at night where you are. And so, and by the way, thank you for staying up to do this. It's very nice. And so Arden is in high school now, and she's been in there for about a month now. And I got a text this morning that said, my friend and I are going to go down to the cafeteria in between classes and get something to eat, which is not something that has ever really happened before. My son would do it all the time. Like, he'd be like, I jumped out of Spanish real quick and got a bagel, or I did but she was suddenly saying it to me. And only about a half an hour before, her blood sugar it was crazy. It was sitting at like 110, and I was pretty happy with it. And I didn't think much of it. And all of a sudden I got 135, like straight up. Like, the Dex just said, wow, she's jumping up. So we pretty aggressively bolused for the 135 straight up. And, it leveled off at 140, and I thought, okay, I'll pull it back down slowly. Maybe we'll make another decision soon. But before I could do that, she texts me, and she's like, we're going to go get something to eat. And so I said, what are you going to eat? She said, I don't know. I've never done this before. And I was like, okay. So when are you going? In a few minutes. I said, well, bolus a unit right now. And she's like, okay. And before I knew it, I thought, what are the odds that what she's going to get is that small? Plus she's 140, and I wasn't sure that the small bolus I used for the hour up was really going to bring her blood sugar back down. Anyway, so I texted her back. I said, do 2 units. So she did 2. About 8-10 minutes later, I get a text that says, I have a hash brown, which I said, okay, is it bigger than your hand or smaller than your hand? And she's like, it's not really as big as mine. Right? So she tells me it's a little smaller than her hand. And I'm okay. So she's got this great signal in the school, but it's just for text. Like, if you try to send a picture out of that school, it gets all like bound up, so I was like, well, forget taking a picture of it.
Oh, how strange.
Yeah. And beyond that, who cares, right? It's a hash brown about the size of her hand. You would buy it at school. And I thought to myself, couldn't possibly be more than 25 carbs is my guess, right? And so I'd given her 2 units. She was 140. I figured that the 0.6 I gave her for the arrow up probably just stopped the arrow. It wasn't going to bring it down. So I needed another 0.7 to bring her back down. And the thing was, I was like, all right, just double your basal for an hour on top of this basically 2.6 that's already going. And right before you and I got on, I told her to cancel the temp basal. And her blood sugar is 88 and nice and stable. Now,
there you go.
That is the key, the core of what you're talking about, of just staying fluid and rolling with it. Because, I mean, imagine the other side of that. I'm 140. I want to go get a hash brown right now. Most people would have just said no. Like, right? Like, you can't eat now. Like, don't eat now because I don't know what's going on.
Exactly. Let's just not do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so instead, I was just like, let's just be aggressive here and we'll cut back if we need to. And if we have to, if we have to cheat with some sugar at the end because we got it wrong too aggressively, better than you being 200 over eating this stupid hash brown, right? And I'm really thrilled.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm thrilled with how it worked out. But is that something that you just picked up along the way as you were growing up? Because it's interesting, right? Because you've gotten diabetes education in America and like in a couple of different places. So is this just an amalgam of different ideas? How did you come to this? I can tell you how I came to it, but how did you come to it? I just went to myomnipod.com/juicebox. I hadn't been there in a while. And Omnipod spruced it up. They put new images there and some new text. It's quite fancy. From there, there's nothing to do except fill in your name, your zip code, your email address, and a phone number. Then you tell Omnipod what kind of diabetes you have, and you're off to the races. You get to experience the Omnipod for yourself because they're going to send you an absolutely free, no obligation experience kit. You like that new word? It's not a demo pod anymore. They're calling it an experience kit now. I like it. It's more now. It's more hip. It's what's happening. It's how the kids are talking. So if you're considering insulin pump therapy, the best way to understand the comfort and convenience the pod offers is to try it firsthand. Get your free experience kit, which includes a sample non-functioning pod, and see what you think. There's absolutely no obligation to buy. You'll be able to wear a non-functioning pod to see how it feels, find the area on your body that works best for you, and experience what freedom feels like when you wear an insulin pump that doesn't have any tubing attached. If you'd like to try the insulin pump that Arden's been wearing for over a decade, go to myomnipod.com/juicebox. When you get there, fill in the information, click the big red button that says request your experience kit, and you'll be well on your way. myomnipod.com/juicebox, with the links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com. The Omnipod is one of the best decisions we've ever made for our daughter, and I think you'll love it too. This is the perfect way to find out because there's absolutely no obligation or cost, and summer's coming. Wouldn't you like to swim with an insulin pump that doesn't have tubes?
We were diagnosed, obviously, in New York, and they didn't really, I guess, educate us too much at that time. And it was largely down to my mum basically learning on the fly.
Sure.
So it was a lot of books and that kind of thing. And I think, I don't know, just as time went by, I was just curious and looked to different avenues to learn things and also just, we did it as it came.
Just right. You just figured it out as it comes. There's a graph online today in a Facebook page where a parent's like, look at this. It's the pump. It's this. It's that. I'm like, your kid just doesn't have enough insulin. Like, I can see it looking at it. Like, you can try blaming the pump if you want. You can try blaming the food if you want. You can try blaming everything if you want to. You didn't use enough insulin. And now this kid's high, and you keep using not enough insulin to try to bring him or her back down. So you start to get a fall again. Then it levels off because you don't have enough insulin. And so that weird thought I ended up explaining by saying, listen, if your blood sugar's too high, you've either, you've used the wrong amount of insulin or you've mistimed it, or sort of a combination of both. And if your blood sugar's too low, you've used the wrong amount of insulin, you've mistimed it, or a combination of those two ideas. That really is it. The whole thing is timing and amount, right? It's just
exactly
right. You call it whatever you want. I don't care. I don't give a what you call it, but it's not a thing. It's not a rule. It's not It's just common sense.
Exactly. It's just, yeah, that's exactly right.
Right. And so when you try to teach that to somebody, when someone comes into your boathouse, right? Let's assume that's where your business is, in a boathouse, where you spend half of your day beating away crocodiles and the other half helping people with diabetes. When someone comes in and shows you a graph like that, how do you explain it to them?
It's dependent on the particular person who you're explaining it to, be they adult or child, but also that particular person's personality, which I guess you get, off of how they appear and how they talk to you and what they say to you and everything like that. So it changes for everyone.
Sure. No, I hear you, because I spoke to somebody, this is long ago enough now that I don't feel like I'm hurting anyone's feelings, but I spoke to someone who one time was a younger parent, and I mean really younger, and didn't appear through like initial contact that they probably got much past high school, and their understanding of things was really more basic, right? I really credit the conversation that I had with that person years ago to simplify the ideas, because I was on the phone with a person I never met before, who I sort of had said, I'll do my best to help you. And then once I got into that moment, I was like, I don't want to let them down, but what I'm saying isn't registering with her. And so I found like these different ways in that phone conversation. It was the first time I ever said to anybody, hey, you got to think of it like a tug of war. And now, right? And now I say that here on the podcast, and people are like, oh, that's incredibly helpful, because I've now honed that idea by saying it to people over and over again until I've gotten it down to, like a brisk, couple of moments to make I actually said to somebody the other day, there's a parent I'm considering talking to privately, and she said, well, I don't know how much time I have. I said, don't worry, I can explain diabetes in between 42 and 55 minutes. And I really feel like that now. Like I can give you, I can take somebody from very little understanding to a more firm footing in less than an hour. And if they can follow along and keep up, Yeah, it's really, it's not as difficult as people make it feel, I guess.
I don't even know if I feel like I could do that though. And I don't know if maybe that's because I'm spreading myself over every type of diabetes. But
well, you're also giving complete information. I'm sort of repainting your perspective when I talk to you. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm taking this thing you thought about insulin, and people say I'm afraid, and I go, okay, well, here's why you shouldn't be afraid, and here's where we can take some of the fear away. You just give them a fresh coat of paint on their thoughts, because I think what happens to most people is just what happened to you. You get this very incomplete, instruction when you're first diagnosed, and then you build off of this incomplete information, which only means you're making, mistakes along the way. You're assuming things you shouldn't assume. You're letting your fear get a hold of you. Before you know it, you're so far away from your diagnosis and so scared and freaked out and lost that, what you really need is you need a reset. You need somebody to push the button and say, okay, let's start over. Think about it like this now. Yeah,
exactly. And if you don't just do that yourself, exactly. You just need someone to say you're allowed, it's okay. just do it.
Oh, the permission's a huge part.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is silly, because it happens to me all the time where an adult says to me, I don't now that you've said it, I don't know why I wasn't doing that.
Yep.
And I say this all the time, and I believe it's completely true. Doctors, police officers, teachers, you grow up your whole life, your parents tell you, just listen to those people. Don't question them. Like they have your best interest at heart. They know better than you. They went to fancy college. You didn't go to fancy college, or whatever it ends up being. And so we're indoctrinated through youth to just listen blindly. And so what I find happens is that by the time people get to me, It's almost like a bad horror movie. Like they realize they should leave the house, but they can't bring themselves to do it. Like everyone around them's being killed, and they're like, my car's here. I should probably go. And instead, they're
I
like,
should probably
no.
leave now.
What's the chances there's a murderer in the house with a knife? I'm probably imagining this whole thing, and they just stay till the bloody end, right? And
Yeah.
really, you just need somebody to say you need to be the real voice in their life who's yelling from the theater, get out of the house. And so
Yep.
once someone gives you permission, it's funny how interesting, because what am I really saying to you? You should trust yourself more. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I'm saying. And
Yeah.
do you find that is true with the people you meet, or I mean, sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes, sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's uh, just that they've gotten random information from random people, and they're trying to follow what they've gotten from everyone, and it's all just so obscure, and I'm like, no, just look at it yourself, just listen, just you see it going up and down. You don't need to actually do what this person or that person said. Just do what you see needs to be done, kind of thing. And listen to that test that you're doing, or it doesn't need to be based on any particular any type of information or that kind of thing. It's in the here and now, what do you need to do?
Yeah, Isabel, I'm going to tell you that I think that you've completely hit on something that I don't think I've ever articulated, but now seems like such a great time to do it. When you go find other people online and you don't know them, you're listening to other people who don't know what they're talking about too. They were there 5 minutes before you going, I don't know what to do. Then someone came around and told them something, which, by the way, may or may not have been true or accurate or helpful. And then 5 minutes later, you show up, and because they're there already before you think they know what they're talking about. Then they tell this BS thing to you, and now you think it's a rule. And it's all right. It's so community is incredibly important if it's good information. But how do you figure out what's good and what's bad when you don't know what the heck you're doing to begin with?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I could put a 10-year-old in the car and tell them that the brake's the gas and the gas is the brake, and pretty much talk them into driving into a wall if I wanted to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like every time you think when you think the car needs to stop, push the one on the right. Even if it feels like you're speeding up, trust me, just keep pushing it down. Because that's what ends up, I mean, think about the person earlier with the graph, and there's something wrong with your infusion set. It might be your insulin. It could be this.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the kid sick? Did this happen? Has anybody blah, blah, blah? But there's 19 different things. Now this person went from, I don't know what to do, someone please help me, to, okay, we'll just consider these 19 things and try to figure out which. And by the way, as I'm looking at the graph and I'm looking at what people are saying, I don't know for sure, I'm not there, but it's my best estimation. Yeah, I'm like, this is not enough insulin. This is all this is. This guy's going to spend days throwing away infusion sets, and he's going to throw a $400 vial of insulin in the garbage. And I'm just like, could you just like double your basal there for a little bit, and let's try bolusing again? I think it's going to come down in a half an hour.
That's exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm like, and it gets me into trouble sometimes as well, because like other health professionals and other specialists really don't like changing things like that. And certainly
morons, Isabel. Okay, they just
completely.
don't. See, you're going to make me upset, and we're having a nice time. And so I just...
Oh, I know. It makes me upset, too. It really annoys me.
Why do you think they won't just say to somebody the first and most obvious thing, which is...
more insulin.
You need more insulin. You're not using enough insulin, and you're timing it completely wrong. Do you think they don't... So this is interesting, because I think you have a better insight in this than I do. Do they not know? Or do they not want to be the ones to make your blood sugar low?
I'm certain that they know. They have to know, right? But
I don't know. Isabel, I think that's a huge assumption. I really do.
I know. I would think it has to lie in that they don't want to be the ones to make your blood sugar low.
Yeah,
I would think so.
It's really terrible. It really is, to let someone live an entire life with an elevated blood sugar, to give them the stress and the anxiety and the health issues that come with that, and to make them think that this is like, quote, just diabetes and there's nothing you can do about it. So just live this horror, every day and every night forever and ever. And then this person who's telling you that 100% knows either it's not true or knows they don't know what they're talking about. Like, I don't know how with good conscience.
Yeah, that's just horrible.
You can give people that advice, right? Like a real person who was concerned for your health would say to you, I have no idea. Go find someone who does.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's right.
Not like, hey, let's flip a coin and try this now. Or I like people with a graph. The kid's blood sugar is 250 all day long, and they said, oh, I contacted our endo, and we're moving up our basal rates by 10%. I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, what will that do? Make the kid's blood sugar 230 all day long? Like, what are you talking about? It's insane, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Isabel.
I think sometimes that the ones who are looking after it, they don't have diabetes. They just don't quite understand.
You know what else is often misunderstood? People's desire to not have a ton of carbs in their food. Some people just don't want that. Some people are looking for high protein, no grain, and low carbs. They want nutritious and they want tasty. Some people are just like, oh, just eat stuff with carbs in it. But that might not be for you. And if that's how you want to eat, you're absolutely in luck, because as a listener to the Juicebox Podcast, you will save 20% on your order at realgoodfoods.com. Now, Real Good Foods has an incredible selection of foods. I don't know which one you're going to want. You are going to have to head over to the website and check it out for yourself. But I know there's cauliflower crust pizza, which is like all the rage right now. They also have pizzas with chicken crust, like crust made out of chicken. Gobble, gobble. How about cheese, pork, or chicken enchiladas? They even have chicken poppers with pepperoni, mozzarella, jalapeno and white cheddar, artichoke and cheese. And if you can't decide which one of those you want, just get a mixed case. 4 pepperoni, 4 jalapeno. You can do whatever you want. The cauliflower pizzas come in vegetable, pepperoni, margarita, and cheese. I think what I'm saying here is that you need choice, and Real Good Foods offers that choice. You want to make the choice to eat low carb? Do it. You don't want grains in your products? Do it. You want to decide between jalapeno and pepperoni poppers? Mix up a case any way you want. You do it. And you can do all of that while saving 20% on your entire order, plus getting free 2-day shipping. That's just for listening to the Juicebox Podcast. So go to realgoodfoods.com and don't forget to use Juicebox at checkout.
Or understand exactly what needs to be changed or by how much, or understand why that is as well. And they just kind of go twinkle toes around it. They just really don't change it by enough to make any significant difference, as obviously you've noticed.
Twinkle toes is a strong candidate for the title of this episode, just so you know. It's absolutely infuriating because, and I've used this stupid analogy before, but if I taught you today how to drive and you'd never driven before, and I told you, look, don't press on the brake too hard because it'll send the car into a skid or something like that. So just press down halfway. And then you went out and you were driving, and I don't know, you were driving towards a tree and you pressed the brake down halfway, but you weren't stopping. Would you just continue on with my advice until you crashed into the tree? Like, right? And,
of course not.
Well, yeah, of course not. Except that's what we all do with diabetes, right? We're just like, well, the guy said to do this, and how is it not? Listen.
How does it not change?
Yeah. How does it not change? Right. Right. How doesn't someone now? And we do see small increments. I have people who go back to their endos all the time, and I love you people who do this. They go back, they have a significant change in their A1C, they have a significant change in their stability. The doctor says, this is a miracle, which, by the way, it's not a miracle. It's just they understand how to use their insulin now. What happened? And they tell them.
Yeah, and it took a lot of hard work as well.
Yes, and they tell them, look, I learned this on a podcast. Be silly, disregard me if you want, but I listened to you for years, and this is what we got. Yeah. And I listened to a rando guy on the internet, and this is what I got. Months. Right.
Yeah,
and that really is the interesting part. I was trying to explain this to the AADE the other day, because I'm really trying to get this message into educators' hands. But it doesn't really take that long. Like I've seen people, most emails, most of your correspondence back to me, people who find it clicks for them, usually indicate 90 days. It took me about 3 months is what most of your emails say. The people who really struggle will say it took me 2 visits to the endo, and then when you talk to them a little more, you realize they heard you, but they got stuck on one thing and they couldn't make the decision. Some people will be like, I hear what you're saying, but my A1C didn't really go down that much. And then as I prod them a little more, they say, well, I don't pre-bolus still. I'm like, well, okay, well, that's why.
Yeah.
I haven't been as bold with my insulin as I think I should be. Okay, well, that's why.
Yeah.
And that's a thing,
they
got to get over. But
and all it really ever comes down to is more insulin.
Yeah, it's so stupid.
But people are just ever so scared of it.
And by the way, let's say this, totally reasonable, right? Like it's completely reasonable to be, I mean, you and I are talking in the beginning of October, and just last night the episode with Izzy Meehan went up, and I'm sure you haven't heard it yet. But Izzy,
No, I haven't, but I've seen your podcast, your blog and posts.
And so it's so amazing because by the time people hear this, they'll have listened to Izzy. And I really want them to revisit this idea for a second. Like, it's easy to say, Izzy used too much insulin, she passed out, and she crashed her car. It's a very basic look at what happened. What really happened, if you listen to her, is that she was normally a very healthy eater who one day just got incredibly hungry at school and decided she was going for it, ate a bunch of kind of junky food that she doesn't normally eat. Right? She didn't know how to bolus for it, and she didn't pre-bolus for it. And so she gave herself some insulin. Her blood sugar started shooting up. She waited too long to try to address it. Then she addressed it with a bolus, and then it kept going, and she addressed it again. And even as that happened, a number of hours later, her blood sugar was good. It was very stable and at a good number. The one thing she didn't take into account was that the mistiming of the insulin. Like, sure, what she put in was able to stop this giant spike and bring it back, but she forgot that pretty soon the insulin was going to still be active while the food was going out of her system. And then she told me she counted on her CGM to tell her if she was getting low. She made this great analogy. She said, I used to treat my Dexcom like a GPS. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, I follow my GPS wherever I need to go. But the truth is, because I do that, I don't understand the roads at all. I don't ever know where I'm at. I do what this thing tells me. And she said, and I've been doing that with my Dexcom for years, and it's always been okay. But this one time, her blood sugar dropped faster than the technology could keep up with. And so she did not get an alarm that told her, hey, something's going bad, because the thing didn't know it was going bad when it happened. And you can look, and then I asked her afterwards about, what do you still think about the technology? She said, oh, it's amazing. I use it all the time, and I still wear it, and it saved my life a bunch of times. It just, this one time, it was a confluence of events, right, that led to this low blood sugar. But in the end, some people will listen and hear, Izzy took too much insulin and crashed her car. But that's not what happened. Izzy probably took the right amount of insulin and completely mistimed it with the food. That's what really probably happened. And you'll never know for sure, but I think her story was incredibly important to share, but at the same time I was scared that people would get fearful and say, oh, see, So, this is maybe my way of coming along afterwards and telling people, look, you can't be afraid because you heard her story,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you can't be scared because you hear any stories like that. You've just got to keep on going. But it's the same as with anything. It's, I've heard you use car crashes as an analogy for insulin numerous times, and that's exactly, it's exactly right. You can't be scared of driving because you've seen a car crash.
Right.
You still have to go out and do it.
Life in general is exactly like that. You can't be, I switched recently to the statistic that a couple of times a year, a large chunk of frozen urine falls out of an airliner and hits a house or something like that.
Oh yeah, I heard that one.
I don't hide in the house because of my fear of frozen urine flying out of the sky. It just would be, and if we made a list of all the things to be scared of, then and you actually
would never leave the house.
Well, and you heeded that list, you would then have a mental illness.
Completely.
You really would. You would beat yourself into a spot where you would say, well, I mean, why am I even alive if I just sit in this space like hoping the urine doesn't hit me? And so it's such a funny thought.
I get such funny images in my head when you say it.
I appreciate that because in my mind it's like a big iceberg and it's yellow and it's coming down like at this incredible rate and then it hits your house. Then later you're outside, you go, do you smell that? What is that? And why is there a hole in the roof? And so the point has to be that you got diabetes and that sucks. But this is your reality.
You just have to. Yeah.
This is your truth. So move forward with it and do the best you can with it. And don't lie to yourself about what the best you can is. I think that's one of the scarier things I see people do is they talk themselves into believing they're doing everything they can.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I don't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Some people are. Some people can take it on and just live with it and do it right or try to do it right. And I think some people just you have to be in the right frame of mind or you have to be in the right place to start doing something like that. I have so many clients who or I have a few clients who you just work so hard at trying to get them to just do a bolus, just do anything. It just doesn't get through to them yet. These are mostly younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it just does not even register with them kind of thing, or it registers on the day, but then
the next day it doesn't.
You find out it hasn't. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think the other side too, and I do want to kind of add on to what I said is there are some people have legitimate illnesses like anxiety and depression and things that stop them from doing that. I'm not talking to you. Yep. You people have a different hill to climb. I'm talking about everyone else who just doesn't pre-bolus for a meal, eats cereal, blood sugar goes to 400, and they go, oh, that's just diabetes, nothing I can do about it, and just moves along their way, because none of that is true.
And moves along,
Right. None of that is true. I mean, what I tell you, Arden,
you just need more insulin.
Exactly. What was Arden's blood sugar a half an hour ago? 88 and stable? It's 85 and stable now. So I, with no heads up, with a food I've never seen before, with a food I don't know how much carbs is in. I have no context for what she's about to eat. And I hit this number because I use these kind of 5 or 6 basic concepts that we talk about on the podcast all the time. And when they come down to it, it's what you said in the very beginning. I just sort of stay fluid. I don't get rigid about it. I don't care so much about the math. I don't care. I mean, here's the deal, right? I look at that hash brown in my mind, and I imagine that in any normal situation, if I was able to pre-bolus for it, it would be 2 units, right? But I can't pre-bolus for it because she's hit me with this, I'm walking down right now to get food. So at a 140 blood sugar, I'm just like, okay, we'll put in 2 units because she's going to be eating in 5 or 6 minutes. These 2 units is not scary. It's not even a proper pre-bolus. So then I add the extra basil and the extra insulin. Why? Because now I'm over bolusing the hash brown to make up for the lack of pre-bolus. Right? If you would have let me pre-bolus for the hash brown, maybe I only would have used unit 3/4, 2 units maybe. And it would have been okay if I could have created the right kind of downward drag on her blood sugar as the hash brown was going in. But I couldn't, so I just over bolused to make up for the lack of pre-bolus.
Yeah.
People generally don't think like that. And it's, it really is, it stems from one of my first like visuals in my mind about diabetes when I tried to explain to somebody what it was like to use insulin before I really understood how to use it. I said somebody one time, it's like there's a big scale, like a scale of justice in front of me, like with, the big dishes on either side that you can put stuff in and you find level. Except those dishes have holes in them. And on one side, I'm dumping in carbs, and on the other side, I'm dumping in insulin. And I'm just trying to keep them level, and it's a little more carbs, a little more insulin. And that's how it used to feel to me. It used to feel like a panic, like I could never catch up to it. But I realize now that was just the beginning of a thought that now later kind of culminated in the idea of you're creating a tug of war that you're hoping neither side wins. And you can't let one side pull first, and you can't let one side pull harder. And when they're both tired and they stop, they need to be tired and stop at the same time. One team can't get tired and 10 minutes later the other team get tired, because then you're going to end up being overpulled in one direction or the other. And so how do you do that, right? You start to figure out how insulin works in your body. But it's not that hard. Like, it really isn't. But people all the time like, oh, my blood sugar is always 150. It won't go down. And I was like, all right, well, how much would it go down if you put in another unit? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, why? Like, well, I mean, what if I get low? I'm like, well, what are you're not like, you're not in the Serengeti. Yeah. Like, if it's 80 diagonal down and you're like, oh God, I just put this insulin in like 20 minutes ago, try to realize all you've really done is really well pre-bolused for whatever it is you're about to eat to stop this drop.
You're not risking low after,
Do you do that ever? Like, do you ever get really high and then crush it to bring it down, realizing that what you are what you're mainly doing is pre-bolusing for the next food you're going to eat?
Oh, completely.
Yep.
Yep, completely. Actually, I did that just tonight.
Yeah, because it's a long day for you, right?
Yeah, well, I went to sleep and then I've set my alarm and gotten up.
You're a real adult. Isabel. Good for you. I would have stayed up and then been on the.
Because I'm feeding.
Are you breastfeeding?
Yeah.
Oh my God, really? That's terrible. Those kids always need.
Gotta get sleep where I can.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, so tell me a little bit about. You've had 2 babies in a short amount of time. How did you find being pregnant with diabetes?
I didn't find it too bad. Like, I had done my research. You had someone on the podcast that I had already previously looked up. She did a
Ginger
book about type 1 and pregnancy. Yep.
Have you listened to the previous episode of the podcast? The one where Jake Leach came back from Dexcom to talk about the upgrades to the G6 mobile app? How about you can say, hey Siri, what's my blood sugar now? And it tells you. I'm already getting notes from people who are telling me that the Hey Siri functionality is crazy helpful while you're driving. If you haven't heard that episode, head back after this and check it out. But to the rest of you, to those of you who don't have a Dexcom yet, I want to speak to you in a very deep and soulful voice. Wouldn't you like to know what direction and speed your blood sugar is moving in? Wouldn't you like to be able to see your child's blood sugar while they're off at a friend's house or at school? Wouldn't it be great to see how long it takes insulin to start affecting your blood sugar? Don't you think I should start speaking even deeper? Go to Dexcom.com/Juicebox to find out everything about the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. My daughter Arden's A1C has been between 5.2 and 6.2 for 5 solid years. And you know, because you listen to this podcast, that I accomplished those numbers, largely due to the data and information that I get back from the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. Would you like to make a real change and find comfort? Try a Dexcom G6 today. Go to Dexcom.com/Juicebox or use the links in your show notes or juiceboxpodcast.com. Results shared are mine. Yours may vary. Deep voice. Dexcom. Try it today.
So I had read her book and kind of done my research, and I already changed all of my rates and all that by myself anyway. So I was kind of set for it. And yeah, pregnancy was pretty cruisy. It's crazy how much more insulin the body demands. But yeah, just kind of went along, and I was a bit of a pain in my specialist's butts here because I didn't want to induce. I don't know if it's the same in America, but with anyone with type 1 diabetes, they want to induce at 37 or 38 weeks.
And you said no to that?
Here. But yeah, I said no, and that I wanted to get to 40 weeks, if nothing else was wrong, and nothing else was wrong for either of them, like no high blood pressure or their size was pretty normal and all of that sort of stuff. So I was like, well, nope, I'm going to just carry on and see how it goes. And so, yeah, did that with both of them and got to 39.6 with the first. And then was induced because they certainly won't let me go over 40, unfortunately. But then with the second, just everything went into labor naturally and had it all without anything, which was cool.
Excellent. Good for you. I think it's so it's interesting because you said you read Ginger Vieira's book, right? And
yeah.
And the one thing that you thought to mention while you were talking was I already make my adjustments to my insulin when I need to. So imagine that a big piece of what Ginger was telling you was you can't wait 3 months to go back to a doctor to make an adjustment to your insulin. You have to do it yourself. Yeah. Which is not just great advice for being pregnant with diabetes. It's great
advice for any time.
Right. Because what is the real goal? What's the A1C they put on you when you say you're going to get pregnant? Your OB says, I want your A1C, under 6? Is that what they tell you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, is anyone listening who doesn't want their A1C under 6?
Exactly.
Right.
Well, so there are people, but yeah.
It's funny. I was talking to someone the other day, who said, my A1C is 7.5 and I'm happy with it there. But that person had diabetes for 20 some years, and I didn't argue with him. I mean, it's his life. He can absolutely do whatever he wants with it. But what I wanted to say to him was your theory about your A1C it's just preconceived from what someone told you 20 years ago when
exactly.
The CGM you're wearing didn't exist. And the insulin pump you're wearing didn't work nearly as well as the one you're wearing now. And the insulin you're using didn't work nearly as good as the insulin you were using. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so you're basically using 1980s diabetes advice with 2018 technology. And I mean, like I said, I wish him nothing but luck, but I just think he's stuck in an idea.
Yeah, exactly. And you also get those people that say, I'm happy at 7.5 or wherever it is because I feel really low at 6. Mm-hmm. And you're like, but yeah, that's because your body's running a little bit higher and you're accustomed to it. Yeah, exactly.
Now if you were to, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was finished.
You're making me laugh. Okay, so and I think, listen, if you're a person who's like, look, I'm going to keep my blood sugar at 140 because I'm scared to death, and this is good. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm certainly not saying that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is
terrible.
Right. Don't tell me that 110 isn't possible or 90 is not possible as an average blood sugar during the day. Don't tell me that it's impossible. Just tell me it's not something you're interested in doing. That's a different story. And the reason why that distinction is important is because that when you go out into the world and tell people, oh, it's 140 because I'm scared of being low, you've now told those people that that's the rule.
Yeah.
And it's not the rule. It's the rule for you. It's not,
and also that there's something to be scared of, but like you're spreading the word that it's scary.
Right. It's
But
going to kill you eventually. It's the matter
it
of
shouldn't
when.
be.
Like, whoa,
Yeah.
what? And so listen, it could happen to any of us. That's the frozen urine part of diabetes. Boy, that could be that really is very close to the title of the podcast, the frozen urine part of
that's a good
diabetes.
one.
But that's the part of it. That's the leap you have to make in it. And listen, some people don't drive their car over 40 miles an hour because they think it makes it less likely to be in an accident. What I'm going to tell you is it makes you more likely to get rear-ended by me because I'm going 70. And that's maybe my fault, but I hear that. So it's a theory idea, but it's so funny. This is going to seem disconnected for a second, but I saw a person on social media just this morning say that they're blocking people and it feels so good. And the inference was they had heard too many kind of mean, nasty things around the Judge Kavanaugh confirmation here in America, and they had had enough of it. They didn't say what side they were on, which makes this point even better. I don't know if they thought, this guy's getting railroaded. Oh my God, can you believe what this guy's doing? And we're still I don't know what side of it they were on. Didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
What mattered was I'm blocking people I don't agree with, which there's a debate in there one way or the other, what the value is in just showing yourself the things you agree with, right? But another person comes into the thread and says, I just had to block someone too because of how offensive what they said was. And here's what I thought. I wonder if what that other person said was really offensive or not, or if it was just offensive.
Well, that's exactly right.
To them. Which doesn't make it wrong. If it's offensive to you, that's fine. But when you're explaining it to other people, the lack of that word in your sentence directs people to believe that you're right and someone else was wrong. You're right for you. You might not be right for me. I might have heard what that person said, what they alluded to, and think, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Or I'm not offended by that at all. I think that's honest. Or any number of other things. But we don't, and it's reasonable, we don't think about our own thoughts as wrong. But you really have to examine what you're thinking, because look around your life. Unless your life is perfect, you've been wrong sometimes. You've made a decision about something and thought, this is going to lead me to this, and it didn't lead you there. And there probably was a decision back then that would have gotten you there. So just understand that everything that pops into your pretty little head, or my pretty little head, isn't exactly right. It's just something I agree with based on my knowledge of the world, which is fairly incomplete because I was asleep in high school. So it's, it really, you have to see, if you don't see that, well, I think that's something you should work on personally. But if you don't see that when you're telling other people about diabetes, that, your 200 blood sugar that you can't affect, when you say that's just diabetes, what you're really saying is, I don't really know the answer to this question. And you could, but what you've done is you've just talked someone else into believing there's no answer to. That's the dangerous part. That's the part that makes me upset. And somehow, if you go back and listen to this hour, you will see that I brought something full circle. And not even I know how I did it. I'm really a magician.
Yep.
I'm mostly joking and partly really proud of myself. Oh my God.
That's quite impressive.
It's quite impressive is now the title of the episode. It's quite impressive. I don't know. I'm going to throw the whole three together into like a hodgepodge of words that don't make sense, really. I want to ask you, if you don't mind sharing, a couple of things. First of all, do you worry about your children having diabetes one day, or how do you think about it?
Good question. I don't worry about it as such, but I wouldn't like if they were to get it.
Fair enough.
But I don't worry about it. I don't do TrialNet or any of those things, unfortunately. I don't know if you've heard of Endia.
I have heard of that, but what is it? I know the word, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's another study of type 1 diabetes. So it's environmental determinants of type 1 diabetes. And it's a study that they've been doing here in starting in people that are type 1 or have type 1, I think, in the family, and who are pregnant. And they start the tests in pregnancy, and they also get information on your diet and everything like that, and do blood tests and stuff. And then once the baby is born, they start a whole bunch of tests on the baby, as well as the mum, as well as the baby's diet and everything, pretty much.
Okay.
And just trying to
determine like what outside influences.
Yeah, exactly. So I was involved in that initially, but I live in Canberra in Australia, and it's one of the smaller city centers, I guess. And there's a lot of other areas have like hospitals that do these tests, but Canberra didn't, and you literally got sent out like a package of testing material, and you had to do it on the baby. And I was just like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen.
Reached your line?
I'm a nurse, and I know how to do every single one of these tests. Like, I could do it, but I just cannot find time to do it. I'm like, it's not happening.
I got you.
So it was just like,
you said you don't do trial on that, and you said you it sounded a little like you were like, oh, but I'm sorry, I don't. But do you not do it because you don't have the time, because you don't want to know if your kids have the markers, or because like there's a reason you don't do it? What is it?
Yeah, I it's partly because I don't want to know, but then I also do want to know. The reason is flimsy. Yeah, I just don't do it.
I absolutely understand. I'll tell you whose answer, from a parent who also has type 1, whose answer has always stuck with me the most. Excuse me. Okay, this is the end. Sorry. Sam Fold, he's an American baseball player. He was on the show a couple years ago, and I imagine I'll have him back pretty soon. But I asked him, does he ever think about his kids? And he said, I live a really great life with type 1 diabetes. Like, if they get type 1, they get it.
Yeah, and that's my kind of attitude as well.
Yeah, I really like that answer.
Even though I kind of would like to know, but I really don't want to know, because I don't think I'm sure it would change something I did. Like, I would probably try and go low carb or whatever if I knew they were at risk. But then I don't think I want to know, because I don't want to change that for them. I don't want to. And then, if they were to get it, that's fine. We can deal with it. But if we were to change all of that prior to, like, what's the point? Because they're going to get it anyway.
Yeah. You're, of course, going to want to check out dancingfordiabetes.com, but don't forget to also find them on Instagram and Facebook. That's dancing4diabetes.com. Yeah, my fear, we did my son once. He didn't have markers, and I didn't keep up with it, to be perfectly honest, because I started thinking if he did have one of those markers, I'd look at him like a ticking time bomb then. Like, I would always just be looking at him wondering when this thing was going to happen, and I thought, that's just not healthy for any of us.
Yeah.
And it did slow me down. Like, I have to tell you, as crazy as it is, the boy's never shown any indications of type 1 so far. And as he was leaving for college, I dropped him off. And in the middle of that very emotional time, about a day or two before we took him, I pulled him aside and I was like, look, I don't want you to worry about this. This is nothing to worry about. Don't think twice about this ever. But if you start losing weight or urinating a lot or get really hungry and stop using the bathroom, those are signs of type 1 diabetes, and I need you not to ignore them.
Yeah.
By the way, that's not going to happen likely. So try not to worry about it, because I just thought, like, isn't it funny, right? I just thought, well, I interview so many people who hit stressors at change of life situations, and they have the markers already, and then these stressors sort of,
but they've just been like, it's because of this.
They always think it's, everyone always wants to assign blame to why they have type 1 diabetes. The science will tell you whenever it happened, it was going to happen eventually, and maybe you got into a stressful situation that maybe sped it up, or you got sick and it sped it up, but it was coming, and so as I told him that, I partly felt badly for putting it in his head, and I partly thought, you know what, this is no different than saying, hey, listen, you got to use a condom. You know what I mean?
No, you're completely empowering him with that information.
Right. I thought so too.
You're bettering him. Yep.
Then a week into school, he got sick. Like, he got a terrible head cold, started losing weight. And I was like, well, here it comes, self-fulfilling prophecy. And he's fine now, by the way. But my point is I get where you're coming from with not wanting to know. Mm. And I also
I agree with ticking time bomb factor. Like, I think if I knew, God, like I occasionally check my kids' blood glucose levels as it is. Like, if I knew, oh my gosh, like I'd probably be doing it a lot more regularly.
It's time for your 8:30 BG check. Mom, I don't have diabetes. Yeah, exactly. No, we do it every day at 8:30.
Don't care. Yeah, exactly.
Not how this goes. Hello, I need a prescription for a Dexcom CGM for my kid. Do they have diabetes? No. But it's coming, and I can't. It's a weird space to be in. It really is. How about,
I think so too.
Any other type 1 in your family line?
No type 1. I've had people with type 2 diagnosed since I was diagnosed. But then the only other thing is thyroid stuff.
Other endo stuff, endocrine stuff. That's what usually. My wife's whole bloodline, the female side of my wife's bloodline, all has different endocrine issues. Not one of them repeats.
Yeah,
it's really something.
Yeah, funny.
But they all have something. Gotcha. So it was pretty. When you were diagnosed, that wasn't something anybody.
No, really completely out of the blue. Yeah. I think they said my parents looked a bit into my family and whatever and said, oh, your great grandpa might have had diabetes. I'm like, does that matter?
The baby's here.
The baby's here.
Hi. Can we say the baby's name?
Hunter. Yeah.
Hunter. He's gonna need to be 100. He lives in Australia. How old is Hunter?
Hunter is 3 months.
Wow, that's so incredible. You made a person. That is really something. Really, that's pretty damn impressive, I gotta tell you. Is he hungry? Is this the first breastfeeding on the podcast that's ever happened?
It quite possibly is, yes.
It's funny, now that I said that, I thought, how do I know someone else wasn't breastfeeding on the podcast? I never asked before.
No, you would have heard something. Although he's had bronchiolitis lately, and he's got a bit of a cough now, so you can hear him a lot more than any other child.
Does he have a favorite side? Just one?
No, neither of mine did.
Yeah, they'll go wherever they go. How do you find? How long did you breastfeed with your first one?
For 18 months.
You are a trooper, Isabel. Seriously, that's well done. And this is your intention with Hunter as well?
Yeah, just until, Austin is my first, and he I think he self-weaned because my breast milk probably changed flavor, I guess, when I was pregnant, maybe.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, he weaned. So I guess, I'll do it until
how did that
possibly doesn't want to.
How did that feel to have Austin look up at you and go, the quality of your product has dropped, I'm going to go on to something else now? Did you feel,
No, I didn't really care too much. It was a slow period, and he just
that was that
dwindled and stopped, reduced kind of slowly, and it hasn't really bothered me. I don't know the feelings that some people get when they're like, oh my God, it was the last breastfeed. Oh, I wish I could have, I don't know, done what? Nothing.
I just imagine your toddler sitting around with other babies going, I used to go to this great coffee shop, but they changed the formula. And so I stopped. Well, I'm looking for another place now. That's really cool. Good for you. Oh my gosh. Well, that's incredible. How does breastfeeding change? Does it change, I guess I should ask, your self-care? Do you have to eat more? Does that mean?
Not for me, really. Normally, I think people's blood sugars go low with breastfeeding. But I've noticed that mine have no pattern whatsoever while I'm breastfeeding. So, I can go high, I can go lower, I can just stay stable. So CGM is my best friend. basically.
Wow.
And I'd be lost without it.
Yeah. Which one do you use?
I'm on the Medtronic 640G with the N-Link.
Okay. Oh, you're using how does that work for you? Is it keeping your blood sugar at that 120 spot pretty regularly, or?
No. So I think that's the 670.
Oh, that's the 670. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the 670 now. So I can set my own targets with this one. So I'm generally around the 5s, I guess. Okay. That's my target.
That's excellent. That's really cool. Well, I know I want to let you go out of respect to what you're doing, and at the same time, I feel like for the podcast, I need to keep you on while you're breastfeeding. But I am going to let you go because it is very late. What time is it? Is it 1 a.m?
It is midnight.
Midnight. It's midnight where you're at.
Yeah.
You are feeding your child. You've done an over an hour podcast with me, which I really appreciate. Did I leave anything? Did we not say anything that you wanted to say? I always like to check at the end.
I guess you didn't ask about any complications, of which I have none. I just wanted to...
Look at you bragging. You just wanted to brag a little at the end, Isabel.
I just like to let people know that it's possible, you don't have to have had diabetes for, 24 years and have complications.
Yeah. No, you're not bragging. You're trying to tell people, look, there's a real path to... and listen, I think would you agree? You do as best you can. You do the right stuff. And there's some, listen, there are people out there who could keep their A1C at 5.5 and still develop a complication. Right. But you're putting yourself, oh, the baby's so cute. I want a baby now. I've been a stay-at-home dad for 18 years. I'm basically a lady, is the rule. And so when the baby makes that noise. Why haven't you had
a baby?
I tried. I couldn't get pregnant. It was really something. I tell you, I read all the books. I felt like I was doing it right, but it just didn't. It didn't pan out for me for some reason.
For you. Sorry.
Yeah. I've moved on. So.
Yep.
Okay, unless you can make that kid. What's that? I'm sorry.
You take the hits as they come.
Exactly. I'm just rolling with this the same way as everything else. Now, unless you can make that baby make one more cute noise, and I don't know how you actually make a baby do that, I'm going to let you go so you can do what you need to do.
I don't know how either.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, and thanks for the podcast. It's awesome. I really try to tell as many people as I can here. I'm telling all my certainly type 1 clients about it and saying it's got a lot of great information, and I think everyone can get a lot of value from it.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that you do that. I appreciate it when everybody does that, but that's definitely why it's growing. And I just had to put together my proposals for 2019 sponsorships, and as I looked at the numbers, I was like, wow, this thing is really growing. And it is totally because somebody like you's out there telling someone about it. So thank you very much.
No problem. How long have you been doing it again?
Oh gosh, I started in January of 2015. So I'll be starting my 4th year in a few months.
Crazy.
Yeah. It's gonna have it'll have 200 episodes probably by the time the 4th year starts.
Oh, yep. Very cool.
So it's pretty cool. I find it very. I find it incredibly fulfilling, so I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. Well, thank you again.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Hunter.
Bye.
Well, I definitely want to start by thanking Isabel for staying up so late to record this episode. I also want to thank Dexcom, Omnipod, Dancing for Diabetes, and Realgood Foods. Don't forget that you can find links to all the sponsors at juiceboxpodcast.com or in the links that are right there in your podcast player. There's show notes in there. Just tap. You'll see. It's a pretty long episode, but before I let you go, I want to remind you to leave ratings and reviews in iTunes because they help the show be found. And if you need proof that that's true, here it is. You guys have been leaving a lot of really great ratings and reviews lately, which I appreciate. Because of that, the podcast is steadily in the top 200 in its category, has been for like 6 weeks. We used to pop in and out of the top 200, but now we're just there. We're like there to stay. So that's all you guys. Thank you very, very much. When you leave those ratings and those reviews, that helps iTunes understand that people like the show. It also helps them find the show. When they find the show, they'll subscribe. When they subscribe, we end up in the top 200. Not only that, but we are the best and most well-reviewed diabetes podcast online. And for that, a sincere thanks. Don't forget to check out the Diabetes Pro Tips series if you haven't seen those, and I'll be back next week.